All right, you know how us old timers like to say, they don't make things like they used to. They don't make them as good as they used to. And I always tell you, China on the label, shit on the table. But I got frustrated yesterday because I watched a video about these things, and I went and bought the ones the guy told me to buy, and they just don't work that good. The contacts aren't that good. And then the Radio Shack one from long ago, I got as part of a deal. I bought something from a guy. This was in there. But I want to show you what goes wrong and why the old days were better. Now, let me find my Continental Specialty. All right, this is just a small piece of Continental Specialty. These were the first guys to make these wireless, they call them Solderless Proto board, okay? Later on, people call them breadboards, but they're proto boards. They're not breadboards, actually. Usually breadboards, you do some soldering. Or you might have little clips, you press down Farron stock clips. But this is the company, Continental Specialties, and this is what they come out with. I was in RC at the time. I got laid off. I was looking at new tech schools to go back to school, and one of the schools had these things set up, and this is what I copied. They had like a power supply, and they had one of these, a piece of Continental Specialty on top. So I came home, and I immediately copied it, and I started building on it. Many circuits, thousands of circuits. And then after I moved here, I saw one of these for a good price. Of course, it didn't work, but one of these jobbers. And these babies go for anywhere from $39 in really bad shape, or not working and the guy don't tell you, or up to $229 in the box as a collectible. Okay, now what goes wrong? Okay, all right, this is the creme de la creme. Okay, this was made correctly. This was a company, and this is like a really hard plastic. The contacts in here are probably tin plated or silver plated. Okay, remember that, tin plated or silver plated. They've worked very well with a piece of telephone wire. Let's see if this one's stripped. All right, this is telephone wire. Okay, it comes in a bundle like this. It's called station wire. Okay, let's just say there's 50 conductors in there, and every one of them has a different color. This is what I use to wire my circuits up, and I can cut them. Like if you see this project here, you can cut each wire custom to a certain length so it doesn't become a real mess. And you can do some RF circuits on here if you do some bypass capacitors. If you use these prepackaged things that they suck you into, when you use these, it forces you to use a certain length automatically, but a different color. But it causes the circuit to go in oscillation. Okay, that's why I'm old school, and I know what works, and I stay with stuff that works. But I saw a guy do it, a video, and he was warning that the new ones coming out were no good. So I bought a bunch of the ones he recommended, and these, they don't grip the wire tight enough. They work good with resistor wires and those prepackaged these things. They work good with this, but they don't work with single wires that you would get from station wire. Okay? Oh, and they don't work with old-fashioned transistors. The old, no, I shouldn't say old-fashioned, but the smaller signal transistors. These do not always grip it correctly. Oh, wait, these do not always grip it correctly. And power wires, I was getting all kinds of intermittents. I was going in circles. So anyway, I had a complete circuit wired up, and here's the Radio Shack again. And I'm like, what the hell happened to this? Radio Shack usually has some pretty good quality. So I pulled it up, and I realized that these are pushed down. All right, so now, if you put an IC in here, right here, these will push down. And you say, well, it was what do you call it? Double sticky tape to this piece of steel, and had 3 connectors on it. But as you push down, this thing was lifting up. The double sticky was allowing it to lift up off the metal tin just enough that those connectors would go down, and now 1 or 2 of your IC pins aren't making contact, and it was driving me nuts. And then finally I had to get this thing out. And this is from 1975. And it's actually sort of worn out from being used so much. That's why I bought the bigger one and the newer one. Wait. I brought it out and I wired it up and it works. But these are total crap. Like I said, the guy did a video on them. He explained, but he was probably using components, resistors and that. And he didn't realize that ICs don't make contact. And sometimes you put the IC, you click the IC down, and the IC will flip over to the other side and disconnect the whole row. The whole side of the IC disconnects. So I got a crap load of these that I'll probably have to throw out. This is no good. And I'm back using something from 1975. That's sad. That's really sad. But a lot of times you say to yourself, were the old days really that good? And yes, a lot of things were really good. Okay, I can tell you that right now. China on the label is shit on the table. Everything China copies is an almost. I told you the story. A friend of mine had a hardware store. And he had vendors that sold him stuff. And they sold him these valves. And he had to buy a certain amount of these valves. And what was keeping his hardware store alive was he was selling to plumbers. A plumber would walk in and grab a valve, hold it up, show it to the owner, and say, "I'll be back later," or whatever. So he'd hold it up, and the guy would get a book out for the plumber, and he'd write down the valve and the price, and the guy would come once a month and pay his bill. Well, he got a batch of these China-made valves, and these guys were installing them in houses. In the water line, the main line, but they never realized the valve never shut the water off. You could turn the valve, and we had one of them apart, and it was hilarious. All the pieces were there, but it wouldn't shut the water off. Okay, and he didn't know what to do because the plumbers were all mad at him because when they go back on a call to that house or that factory or that building, and they go to turn the water off, the valve don't shut the water off. But there's so many instances of China crap. Now, on the circuit I've been working on, of course, I proto board it first, and then perf board it, and it's done. Now I know a lot of people. I got in arguments years ago with people. I go right to a circuit board. I lay it out, blah blah blah, and I got talking with these guys. None of them got their projects to work. After they were bragging to me, I go right to a circuit board. Then they started emailing me, asking me for help, and certain circuits you got to watch out on a proto board. They oscillate. You got to know how to put some. You put like a 0.01 from the positive, the ground, and the positive of the chip. You put a 0.01 across it, or a 0.1, and that keeps it from the RF from the chip getting back out on the B plus, causing another chip to go in oscillation. That's another thing you'll learn. So then when you get to this, same thing with this. This is a 0.01 bypass cap. It's from plus. On this chip to ground, okay? And every part on this circuit that I'm building, you have to have those, and you have to separate the 5-volt supply from the oscillator supply. You don't want the switching. There's going to be this thing here. This is the divide by 14 chip. You don't want all those signals mixing with the oscillator because it'll cause extra stations on your radio. It's pretty interesting stuff when you really get into it. But I just wanted to show you these wireless proto boards. And this is actually, some people call this CAT wire. CAT, 5, whatever. But this is actually station wire. And I went on the internet. I spent a full day to locate a company that still sold this by the foot. And you can see I bought a big, this is not just the only piece. I bought a 20-foot piece of this stuff. I won't say a 20-foot roll, but a 20-foot piece of this stuff. And it was like 50 bucks. It wasn't cheap, but these are single strand wires and they're perfect for a proto board. And I have a lifetime supply. And I also do use this, I strip these back and I use the wire inside as bus wire when I'm wiring stuff up. When I need more than 20 gauge. When I wire with proto board, I use 28 gauge bus wire. If you notice, most of my circuits, there is one insulated wire, and it's a piece of station wire in here, but most of my circuits are point to point, and there's lots of tricks with a perf board. You can go up and over and stuff. That's why I use it. It's very relaxing to sit there, and you do a little at a time, and before you know it, you got a project that's in the can. Meanwhile, I sent it out. I have to send it out again. I made a few mistakes on the PC board. You make a mistake on here, you cut it, remove it, redo it. or originally you do it on here and figure it all out. And then when you go from there to here, it's basically the same type of spacing. And then you bring up your CAD program. This is point 0.1 spacing. You bring up your CAD program, and then you go right from this into CAD and put your pads in. I just had a system, okay, and it's old school, but it worked. It still works, okay. But I just wanted to show you why these solderless proto boards don't work right. And like I said, this one, look at those bolt holes along the top. They want this bolted down, so those connectors don't push their way out through this, okay. And these, yeah, let's make it easy for them. Well, first of all, they give you a big piece of double sticky, and then after a while, this top part starts to come up from this double sticky, and these I won't call them pins, I'll call them connectors. They push down, and when they push down, they don't stick up high enough to make contact with the IC you put in there. Now, if you're just using resistors and wires, you'll get away with it, okay? But on these cheap China unlabeled, these don't really grip the smaller diameter transistor wires and capacitor wires, like a small capacitor like this. Okay, you put it in here, and as you push it in, there's no resistance at all. Okay, am I in the frame? And that's what the guy was showing. Now here they work, but these outer ones don't. He was taking them apart and bending them back in and putting it back together. And then he warned me, and then I ordered some from where he suggested, and they were just as bad. What happens is everybody ends up selling the same crap. And when you know it's China on the label, shit on the table, is there's no name on the item. Okay? American-made Continental Specialties, you know. And these weren't real expensive, but they weren't cheap either. And like I said, I went in that school, and they were using these. And then at that time too, I was using my mother's checking account, and I had her make a check out for me. And then from that day on, everything was prototyped first on that. And that, like I said, it's just, this is why I even got there's a battery connector, recycled from a battery with 2 pieces of that telephone wire on it. And that hooks in here. And then there's a dropping resistor with a Zener diode, so it works on 5 volts. And there is 5 volts here. I could use this 5, but I like to keep it for RF purposes. I like to localize my voltages, so I know if I got it working, then when I go to this, it doesn't work, and I have the wiring right, then I have to work with some deglitching capacitors. I think that's it. All right, that's it.